I can say no.
Great.
Or I can indicate an intention, which is I'll try, but I'm not going to promise that I can deliver on this commitment that you've requested. So it's all about this dance of request and response, and people forming commitments or not. Commitments I mentioned earlier have structure. So it's a request or offer. It's negotiating conditions of satisfaction. It's coming up with, okay, I will deliver on this commitment. And then the performer goes and performs and then delivers the results. The person who requested it gets to inspect and then decide if it meets the criteria of conditions of satisfaction. And then you close the loop and go on to the next thing. So that's very, very clear. And anyone who abuses that or tries to throw their weight around or just kind of compel people to do things they don't want to do, those people don't last in the self-management culture. They just don't last. People ignore them.
Nice. Thank you for the answer. We have one from Dachi. She says, thanks for sharing the history. She'd like to know how the model has evolved since it was first implemented, and if there's anything you would add, any new principle you would add after 20 years.
So taking the second part first, I wouldn't add any principles. I wouldn't change the principles. Those two principles are key. One is a negative principle, don't use force. One is a positive principle, always keep commitments. How has it evolved? Well, there's a system in place called the gaining agreement process. It used to be called resolving disputes, but now it's gaining agreement. And essentially, if you have a company with thousands of colleagues, inevitably you're going to have disagreements. Not everyone's going to agree on everything 100% of the time. So if someone experiences a disagreement with a colleague and all colleagues have an equal voice, how do you resolve that? Because no one has any legitimate power to compel another person to just adopt their point of view. So gaining agreement starts with a request that you change your behavior, and perhaps you see someone driving a forklift unsafely. I request that you stop driving a forklift until you get recertified as a safe forklift driver. Okay. Now the person has to respond, so they can say yes, no, or can negotiate some third option. If the person says yes, great, and they do it, and they're a better forklift driver, that's great. If the person says no, and the requester believes in the request, then they can escalate. And they can get a third-party colleague as a mediator. Their job's just to listen to both parties and offer their best advice. And if that works, great. If the person still rejects the request, and the requester still believes in the request, they can escalate again and get a panel of mediators, multiple voices to listen to both sides, offer their best advice. And if that works, great. If not, then the parties have already agreed by virtue of working in the structure to document their difference and submit it for final binding arbitration. And that's where it ends, because it has to end somewhere. So a person could ask another colleague to exit the company, to leave the company. That happens. It could be somewhat minor. It could be asking them to buy a different kind of paper for the copy machine. It could be anything, but it's the same structure: request and response and mediation and ultimately arbitration. So what we did differently recently is that we used to have the entire burden fell on individuals to have these conversations directly, and some people were uncomfortable with that. So we added an ombudsman kind of a confidential private advisor. So if I don't really know how to approach this colleague, but I have a really serious request for them, I can seek out some confidential private advisement and consulting about how to do that well in advance. And so that's a new mechanism, and that's worked reasonably well to help people have these conversations.
Did that answer your question, Dachi?
Sure, super interesting. Thank you, Doug.
Okay, next, we have a question from Noel. Do you see meaningful adoption of self-management principles in North America? And what is the main type of resistance that you have encountered?
So I see adoption for sure. One of my favorite stories is the University of Phoenix, the Apollo Group in Phoenix, Arizona, had a young leader, a woman leader of her business unit there. She wanted to pursue self-management, wasn't sure how. She got permission from the leader of the larger campus organization to transition her business unit of IT and customer service to self-management based on Morningstar. And so she actually just started a book club and got her 10 leaders involved in that book club. They read my first book, Beyond Empowerment, and they theorized an implementation plan, and then they rolled it out. And she said, her name's Stephanie Gloden, and she said it took them about 12 months, and they were completely successful. And when I didn't even know they were doing it until after it was done, and I was privileged to meet with them, all their leadership team, and we sat around a table, and almost to a person, the people at that table described the fact that these self-management principles were not only beneficial at work, hugely beneficial at work, but they were beneficial in every single aspect of their lives, their personal lives, their family lives, their civic lives. Everything about their lives got better as a result of internalizing the core principles of organizational self-management. So that was fun. And there's actually a YouTube video where she describes that process. We had a convenience store chain here in Northern California that also adopted self-management recently, and that was a lot of fun setting that up as a new startup. And if you're to go into that convenience store, which is kind of a different take on the traditional convenience stores in that it's very much future oriented, super clean aisles, fresh fruit and vegetables, got solar power and electric vehicle charging, and just a really great new brand of convenience store called Freshville. And to ask a young person behind the counter, who's your boss, they will say, I'm the boss. They actually feel like they're the boss, and they are, because they are a completely self-managed organization as well. So I'm seeing examples pop up. It's hard to say, exactly how widespread or what the numbers look like, but people are realizing that in this time of disruption and anxiety and turmoil, that there are better ways to organize instead of the same old way that delivers 80% disengagement.
Thank you. We have one last question, and then we're going to do a poll everywhere before we move into Lean Coffee, where everyone can ask questions. But it doesn't mean in the Lean Coffee you can't also ask questions to Doug, who I assume and hope is sticking around. Yes, Doug?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So in the Lean Coffee, if you still want to ask questions to Doug, that's fine. But we'll also be asking just general questions or discussion topics anybody wants to use to learn more about self-management. So Bill Wheatley is asking, he's curious about how ownership in a company works with this model. Does everyone have an ownership stake, or are there owners that are hands-off and don't use their ownership power against a non-owner?
Yeah, I love that question. Morningstar is owned by one person, the founder. So it's it's not a distributed ownership model. However, the founder has completely subordinated himself to the two core principles of self-management. So he doesn't claim that he does not have the power to walk up and fire someone unilaterally. He has to use the same principles, the gaining agreement process, all the same structures as everybody else. So that's really a big part of why it works. If he was able to just go around and exercise powers that no one else had, this model would have fallen apart 30 years ago. But because he honors these principles and lives them just like everyone else is expected to, this has been sustainable for 35 years.
And just really quick, Rajon is asking if that is Chris Roofer that you're referring to.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so we're going to pivot just a little bit. You can still ask questions from Doug, sorry, but Dom is going to share a poll everywhere just to kind of launch us into the lean coffee part of this community. So ongoing with our monthly calls, we're going to find you guys some curated speakers, some people who have done some interesting things. We're trying to make it a mix of people who have different approaches and experiences like Doug, companies with cases who want to present how their self-managing organization is working, people who have products that are widely used in the self-management space. Was there anything besides that? It was approaches, cases, tools. Oh, and
communication and chat.
yeah, and different types of communities actually was part of it. It was how different communities are formed. So some of them are communities for people like the rebel cells who are actually running businesses. Some of them are like ours. Some of them are historic ones that are no longer running. Some of their international groups. Just to try and connect us with things. So if you stay tuned with us and stick with us in our monthly meetings, we're trying to make a variety of those. So right now you'll see that Dom posted a link. If you want to click on that.
That's the response.
Do I need to present it?
That's the location response. I can present it.
Yeah, I think only you can be presenter. Can you present in the Google chat? Or do I have to log in?
I think I can present, so give me a second.
So if you go to the link in the chat, you should see this. And we're just trying to pull and see where everybody is coming in from. So it's not showing the final results yet. You can see you're looking at my screen, but once everybody is in there, we should be able to see it. Just kind of would like to know where.
Does that look correct?
Yep. And if you're not, just click off the screen. That's okay.
Got more international attendees than
Yep.
we counted on.
Just would like to see. This is great. Actually, I put location. I live in Indiana, but I'm calling in from Charlotte. Awesome. Looks like we've got pretty close to most everybody there. Do you want to go to the next? I think if you click to the right on the bottom.
Sure.
There we
Let
go.
me make sure this is.
Yep, changed on my screen, so I
Okay.
should be able to answer. So if you're in, is everybody in the, looks like you are because you put a dot in. So now you should see another question. What would you like to get out of this community? So we would like to know as we're building this, we're trying to allow self-management and everyone to chip in and make sure that we are sharing goals. So one thing I have, and you'll see everybody else's responses here. So if you see something somebody else like, you can hit thumbs up for that. And then, or you can add one yourself. Thank you for doing this. By the way, it's helpful for us to be able to get some feedback from you guys about what you'd like to see. Oh, yeah, I think you have to hit load other responses to see everybody else's. Get to know more examples. Yep. Exchange knowledge. These are awesome. Has everybody had a chance to respond?
Where's the link to do this?
In the chat.
Okay, let me.
It's
I'm writing something, but I need to find the link.
it's also at the top of the screen there. Do you see where it says poll Ev and what he's sharing? Yep.
No, it's off my top of the screen. I do a poll. Well, it's hard to type, but yes.
It should also be in the chat.
Okay, I don't see it.
Let me put it back in here. Nope. Yeah, Don just posted it again.
Oh, now I'll try.
Okay. Well, we'll just move on from that just so we can keep the call going. If you wanted to give us some feedback, James, we can open that up again. Can we go to the next question?
Sure. Maybe I'll stop sharing my screen for this one.
Oh, this is after. Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll just
okay.
we'll stop
Sure.
sharing the screen and we'll leave this one open.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, okay, let's move into the lean coffee then.
Sure. Let me put the link coffee into the chat. Oh, I'm sorry. Stop sharing my screen. Whoops.
While he's doing that, I just wanted to mention that next month, these calls are always going to be the third Monday of the month from noon to 1 Eastern time. We have to make an exception for January and February because in the US, the third Monday of both of those months happen to be holidays. They're Martin Luther King Day and President's Day. So those will be the second Monday of the month. But other than that, or another possible future holiday conflict, hold your calendar. We'd love to see you. Next month, we have Daniel Mezek, who I actually met years ago. I have his certification as an open space agile practitioner, which is a way to use a concept called open space, if you've ever heard of that, to run an entire organization through self-management. So again, we're trying to cycle through different approaches, different thought leaders, different practitioners, different cases, and different tools. So hopefully you'll see a variety of topics. If there are other topics you'd like to see, again, that's where we're going to do these poll everywhere surveys and maybe a follow-up survey also, because we'd love to hear what it is you'd like us to follow up on. So are we ready to share that?
Yep, I put the link in. I
Okay.
see somebody's joined. So
Great. Can we share? Can you see all of them? I guess it's all the same. So if your question is specifically for Doug, I would just ask that you write Doug and then colon. And if it's just general in the community, just type any topic you want, and then we'll vote on them. So should we give it? Well, we only have 10 minutes left, so
yeah, let's do for a minute.
1 minute. Yep.
Sure. And for anybody who's not familiar with lean coffee, we all add in our ideas and then we vote, and then we just kind of go in order of votes on what's the most important.
For those of you who haven't ever, aren't already following me or haven't ever spoken with me, I'm trying to go and visit as many self-managing organizations in the US as I can. So I'm on a bit of a road trip, and hopefully I can generate some content, can create some more community and help people stay connected.
I can I'll grab the one from
Sure. Okay, so we'll just start with mine because it's the highest voting one. So anybody have any examples of self-managing companies in the US that they wanted to share? Okay. I went and saw Menlo, which is in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's a self-managing company in It's in Ann Arbor, and they do software. And they have actually anyone can go. If you all, let me put this, it's called Menlo Innovations. They actually have a sign up where you can visit virtually or in person. And actually, Doug is trying to connect me with one of their founders to try and see if we can get him to be a speaker. Rujan, we are hoping that it is the same link every month, although I do just caveat, because I had an issue recording this, that may change. So I would say follow the self-management group in high-low for the most updated information. Secondary to that, if you really don't want to join the platform for chats and discussions, you can get one directional communication by following us on LinkedIn. And we'll send that out to attendees for this. So I put in the chat a link to Menlo Innovations. Who's the barbecue place in Austin that we were trying to get a hold of also?
Yeah.
Doug, you probably have a list off the top of your head. You can name a few. You're muted, Doug.
I just threw a couple in the chat. I'm thinking of Nucor Steel and W.L. Gore as exemplars, long-standing practitioners of large quantum of self-management.
There's also this wiki, which I will share, that we found. These are not necessarily US. And then there's, where's the, do you have the, my corporate rebel buddies, do you guys have the corporate rebel case list?
Yeah, I'll send it in.
Thank you. Okay, just to try and get in a couple questions while we still have a few minutes. What else got 3? Self-managing teams also seem to have a social impact. Is this a requirement, a coincidence, or a benefit? Who would like to answer that? Anybody? I'll kick it off. I think self-managing is a benefit. I think that it liberates workers. I think that, you know, having done my, you know, the research that I've done so far, like it's asking people closest to the customers what it is they really want. So we stop building things they don't want, which is a very lean principle as well. I think it also has an altruistic ability to make people feel more engaged, and for really even wealth to be redistributed to workers in some extent when ownership is tied to that. Does anybody else have any thoughts? So I don't think it's all that coincidental that it is largely an organization with social impact, but it doesn't have to be. I've seen a company that makes giant cranes. They're, you know, like what was it? The example that you gave, Freshville, is a convenience store. Tomato companies aren't necessarily a social impact company. So I would actually, my guess is the majority of the companies, the corporate purpose is not necessarily purely for social impact, but the act of being self-managing has one inherently. Does anybody else feel differently or have anything they'd like to add?
I think it's probably more temperament. Somebody who's interested in self-management is probably interested in other more progressive ideas. So I think that's fine. But we do an annual report on the teal landscape of self-management companies. And the main companies we find are like 50 to 200 person IT companies. That's kind of the bulk of who's out there doing this. So they may be socially oriented, but, you know, like I said, it's temperament. It's not core purpose.
Do you think that that could have any relation to the fact that the Agile movement was also, you know, pretty big and influential in some way? I mean, it's not self-management entirely, but it certainly lifted or posited the idea that autonomy can have practical benefits, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think beyond that, it gave people the mindset of, we don't have to operate on default, right? We can change the way we think about what we do, right? I think just lifting that level of awareness leads you to all sorts of new opportunities and new alternatives. Doesn't have to be self-management, could be B Corp or any other structure, but just knowing that you can talk about and change your structure over time is probably a big benefit of the Agile movement.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you mentioned wealth redistribution as you do this, and you could also, I think, argue status redistribution,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think this is the primary reason that these creating realms that are able to operate in this manner is so hard, because it is a tremendous threat to the status quo power structures. And one could argue that for the vast majority of people, it makes for a better experience and it's a more rewarding life. And you have all these people, especially down in the individual contributor level, that are no longer repressed and demotivated, and even in the middle management levels are demotivated. And I believe all that to be true. But there's just so much desire at the top to extract wealth and also to impose power. And I've not seen that fixed from I think you've got to fix it from an ownership structure if you're going to really have it stick. Because every time the executive changes that held this space, then it collapses because the board of directors or the C-level, they put someone else in charge, and that new person in charge doesn't care about doesn't have the same value systems that whoever it was that made this bubble of successful. And these things are successful. I mean, they run circles around other teams, like at least in engineering context. They really do. And it's almost trivial to make them do so if you have the air cover. I've just never seen a way to sustainably maintain the air cover, even if you have lots of examples of it doing a much better job. I don't know what to do about that.
I have seen, and there are examples even on this call, like Corporate Rebels has a company where they're actually buying the companies to avoid that, and then changing those, theoretically hoping to change those to be employee-owned companies that would have a steward or a guide. And they're sort of experimenting with how ownership can change that. So.
Have you seen that done in more complex work? Usually these examples are more predictable work, such as, farming. Not that weather's not much on a farm is predictable, but having grown up on a farm, but it's not complex engineering work, right? And I haven't seen examples of self-ownership at scale, and I would love to.
Yeah, I do.
So one example was one of the original examples in Reinventing Organizations, and that's Favi in France that does manufacturing, and they've been doing self-management for decades. So it's definitely possible. I think to your point about leadership, leadership has to acknowledge that this can't be all about my ego. And I think leaders are in a bind right now. They're often as disengaged and burned out as everybody else. They're not having a picnic either.
No,
and so they have to balance the dichotomy of, I'm burnt out from having to do everything, feel like I have to have all the answers and solve all the problems, but I also don't want to give up this power that I think I have. That takes an enlightened leader to understand that they have to square that circle.
But the example you mentioned was in France, which is a more socialistic culture than the US. And it also was in manufacturing, which is more in the in the complicated systems domain than the complex systems domain.
Right. Well, I can tell you in our report, the top 20 companies were actually predominantly large North American manufacturing companies, whereas the average company was a smaller IT company. So there is a breadth of companies doing this. But I definitely, like AES is one example. They were very forward leaning in new ways of organizing. And then they had a change in ownership and all that went away. You're absolutely right.
Every time it drives me nuts.
Yeah, it is frustrating. And so, you just have to think, well, maybe the board didn't get it, or maybe there doesn't need to be a board, or somehow it wasn't complete. But I would like to think that those germs still exist in those organizations.
We are at time. I hate to cut off. We'd love to hear your feedback. I think we'll do a follow-up survey because I'm wondering if we just need more time for some open discussions. It's a hard balance to strike. But in general, we'd love to hear of the experiments that we had this month. Which ones did you think were great? Which ones did you think were terrible? Which ones were somewhere in between, but you might adjust? So thank you to everyone for joining. Please do join the high-low group. All the discussions can be had. There's a chat function in there, which means you can continue all these conversations ongoing, which would be great. And again, we'd love feedback on what can be good content for the months coming up. Stay tuned, and thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, everybody. Hope to see you next month, November 17th.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.